right, everybody. I am so excited to have Steve O'Leary here from Apex Design. Steve, thank you so much for being on Hey Docs here with us today. I know we have got a lot of really fun, good information we're going to be talking about. And I'm just going to let you start off by telling us a little bit of the history of Apex and your history in our industry. So I'm going to let you just get going.
All right. So I appreciate you setting us up and being a guest. So
Yes.
kind of just a bit of Apex. We're a Chicago-based firm, construction, architecture, and design. We just to give you kind of a snapshot as a family-owned company, 4 generations.
Wow.
The first generation, 2 generation were architects, and then 3rd generation we got into the GC realm. Obviously, a good complementary there with both. And the 4th generation, who obviously I work for today. I'm not in the family myself, but quite a bit of family in the business still. We decided to bring into the design portion, and through the whole transition of those 4 generations, which is incredible. It's always been in healthcare. We've chosen to position ourselves as experts in the field, and did not want to veer from that. So that's where we brought the design in by popular demand. We were doing a lot of private physicians. You know, we weren't really playing in the health systems as our first true generations. So we work for the private physician, looking to lay their own shingle, do their own thing, and that's what we specialize in. So and in creating state-of-the-art facilities nationwide. So we went nationwide just about 3 years ago.
Wow.
We were able to take our process that was tried and true here in the local states around us here in Chicago. And what we want to do is deliver exceptional ROI, have that peace of mind at every phase of the design build journey. And for us, we want to make sure we're mitigating risk for our clients. Eliminating surprises, which always comes up. There's never a perfect project, but saving time, money, and more honestly, effort for our clients, right? I mean,
Right.
Their best ROI is to be chairside, managing their people and not managing us through the project. So, yeah.
Oh, that's great. And what I love is, even though you guys are based in Chicago, you are nationwide. And I think that is so helpful. Of course, Hey Docs is nationwide, our audience is all over. And I think, that's been something important to me, is to make sure that, I'm having guests on that, not only can speak to their specialty, but also if I have somebody that's like, hey, I really loved what Steve had to say. It doesn't matter what state you're in, you're going to be able to help them. So as being here on Hey Docs, we've got a lot of doctors that are listening. And I get asked this a lot, being a startup specialist on the consulting side, where I've got docs that are calling me saying, hey, Jill, I think I'm ready to do my dream project. And it could be a startup doc who's saying, I'm getting ready to do my first practice, and I think I want to go big. I've been planning on this for a while. Or it could be, some of my docs out there that are like, hey, Jill, I've been doing this. I've been renting. I've had my eye on a space. That space came open. That ground is free, and I'm ready to get going. And I think what everybody is always asking me is, where's the best place to start? And I know, Steve, you can help answer this, because there are a lot of things we have to think about, from, a ground up to I've got a shell. So can you just give us some of that really good advice to docs that may be in one or both of those situations?
Yeah. So something I like to follow that I think is tried and true in any project is teamwork builds trust, and trust builds speed, right?
Yes.
There's a lot of there we could dissect, right, and kind of unbox. And where I personally like to advise my clients, prospectively or not, whether we work together or not, is building a team. And that gets thrown around a lot, right? Like, what does that look like? Who's a part of that? I'll kind of break it down here. There's a lot of people, starting from the real estate broker to the banker, the financing, to the design, build, and construction firm or architecture firm, whatever you choose to go. Equipment vendor, you got your CPA, financial aid. They could financial advisor be one in the boat, one in the same, and then your attorney, and of course your spouse or or your partner, whoever it is that they're along for the journey too, right? Emotionally and everything. So
Absolutely.
that is a lot of individuals, right? And I think personally, there's a ton of value in somebody being in your corner, right? Representing as your consultant. And Jill, that's where you come in, right?
Yep.
And ensuring, right, the best interests are guarded and looked after through the process. So that's kind of where to start. Now there's a sequence of all of that. When you said, okay, that piece of property, that ground has come up, or the building, or the shell of where I want to go, I call it the development team, right? Mm-hmm. And there's 3 distinct individuals or firms that are part of that for you and your development team. You're going to start with the real estate search and the acquisition. You may already found it, right? Now you got to get the wheels turning on actually negotiating it, right?
Yes.
And what's that's hard. It's harder than you think, right? And then walking through, is it zoned properly, right? All of that stuff. So what does the market bear? But if you don't, right? What a real estate individual is doing is they're showing you all the demographics. They're pulling together all the data to help make that educated, firm, great decision. And it's not based on emotions. Right.
Yeah. And I'll say, and this, we've worked together. When I'm working as a consultant, that is where we start. We start with, okay, you found that location, you found that property. Our broker is helping us negotiate the deal, however that's going to go. But it does start a lot of times with that demographic component. Is this location going to support your practice for the next 20 years, for as long as you're going to be in this business or as long as you're going to hold it? And I think that's a really, good piece that sometimes people forget is, once we find that location, is it going to support, because if we're going to spend all the money that we're going to go through, to build it up. But the other thing I think is really important, especially with land, and I'm going to just kind of go off for a second on something you said, is zoning. And I know that's like, oh, Jill, that's kind of a boring thing, but I think that's so important for our docs to pay attention to, because sometimes it's just like, the land is perfect, it's going to be great. Can you talk just a little bit about that? Because I think that is so important to, even as we're getting into negotiations on purchasing, we have to know that we can actually, we buy the land, and then if it's not zoned right, or we can't do what we need to, that may or may not be a good decision.
Yeah, you have a very expensive, paper on your shelf or your filing cabinet that says you own this, right?
Right.
Or own half of it, and the bank owns half of it. And then that's, a part of the development team. I'll definitely answer that question here. And what's sequence here is, after the real estate is acquired or picked out, and you need to still get through the zoning, the second individual is going to be the financing. And a bank can make or break this process. I truly believe this. And I think it's great to go to your local institution, have those relationships at a brick and mortar, depending on your rule or in the city, it doesn't matter. You should definitely go to those individuals, right? They've been in your corner to date, right, for your business. But when you're taking this ambitious journey, you really need to work with specialists who understand this, right? And you need to go to them, and I'll get to your question here. You need to go them with a real defined project scope. The bank is only as good as what you give them, right?
Absolutely.
You can't walk up to and be like, hey, here's a 2-page agreement from my architect and my GC. They think it's going to cost X, and it's 2 pages. I call that a Swiss cheese incident, right? There's a lot of holes, and you got to figure out how to fill them, right? And which ones first. So back to the planning and design, that's the third component, right? And that's where, a firm like Apex can step in, or an architecture firm, whatever you choose what route you go. But it's about understanding what the lay of the land, right? It's how does the existing conditions, and how is that going? It's going to define the scope of work. It's going to define your risk exposure to cost, and how much this is going to essentially be. And yes, we've had individuals buy property and try to get back in rezoning. It's a longer, tougher, grueling process. And that's where, when we talked about speed is not on your hand, right? It really isn't at that point, right? You've really lost all of that. So make sure it's zoned correctly. Real estate will help you do that. We then give advisement to that brokerage firm to say, yep, it looks great. We look at utilities, right? Where's water, sewer? Is there even water and sewer, electric, right?
So important, because that's going to affect budget. Yep.
Where is it coming from? Points of egress and ingress, right? Curb cuts. You'd be amazed. Oh, it's got a curb cut. It looks great. Well, people don't, and the uneducated individual think this. It's, how does a fire truck or an emergency vehicle get in and out, right? They actually need a different curb cut if it's on a corner to go off. These are all things that I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but these are all things that need to be examined or run feasibility studies around understanding how the land has position to actually start a project. So,
yeah. So as you've kind of outlined the team that we need to have in place, which I'm 100% in agreement with, this is, what, again, doing startups and, working with docs who are working through these projects. Every single person is so key to, and I love how you said that, to building up to staying on track, speed, or, timing of everything. But can you just, and I know you talked about it a little bit, but really elaborate a little bit more on that, just in why you think that that's so important, and then kind of how you think that it kind of works into delivery of a project.
Right. And that's exactly it, right? And to achieve what's the vision, and achieve that vision, and retaining that through the delivery of it. And it's finding people who understand your needs and requirements for the project, that are capable of delivering. A lot of people, and I always say this, talk is cheap in my industry, right? Or the yes man, no problem, we can do that. Yep. I think it's the proof is in the process. I call that as well to attention, and you need to have people prove to you about how they can truly deliver it, right? And process is very important. And as a physician, I will tell you, I work with a lot of physicians across different specialties, and I truly believe physicians don't, product, service, they like their shiny, toys and things like that, and to have chairside and in the operatories, and but I truly believe good doctors who understand business are buying process, right? They want to understand, it's like a treatment plan. It's a process, right? They want to know, okay, what's the process in which we're going to get from point A to point B. So a proven methodology is very, very important. Jill, I love telling stories. And one recent scenario comes to mind. On initial conversation, a doctor you were being interviewed for his project. He recognized, when he called us, he's like, hey, I recognize the value of your dental specific expertise. Liked it. At the time, though, he felt his local architect, that's who we were kind of going against, right? His local architect in the area has a local representation. He knew the city, could bring, and that absolutely could bring value. And no doubt, of course, there's value in that. And having connections and having some muscle at town hall. Where I think there's deficiency in this, and where it lies, is the approach of not having background, right? Or the capabilities of effectively designing and specifically planning a dental facility, right? So, and what I mean by that, it really starts with the programming, right? And that's why, creating a team and elaborating here, it's about the programming and asking the right questions. What is needed? Designing the building from the inside out, right? Understanding what's going on, and then we can put the exterior walls up. And this is not a commercial office building. This is a dental specialty building.
Yes.
Right? And when you said long-term approach, 10, 15, 20 years, that's what this is going to be. It's going to be a valuable asset, right? And setting your practice up for success. So, accounting for unique traffic flows and creating a successful development. And that's what's really important, is to have the individuals who have the process to actually listen, ask the questions, and then, dilute where needed, right? And then deliver what is needed. So, real quick, I want to finish on that story. We actually, 3 years later, got a call from this doctor, right? We didn't obviously, get to work with him on the plan.
Right.
3 years later, we got a call, and he asked for us to step in and help. What became evident 3 years later, and,
oh my goodness,
had a building to show for it, bought land. He's been sitting on it for 3 years. And what became evident in this model is really the lack of expertise in the planning of the practice, right? Alongside designing the building that fit budget limitations, right?
Yeah.
And we'll get into budget, but I mean, it's spent way more years than needed. What really remains unchanged is the increased focus to speed to market, I believe, in healthcare. And healthcare in general, I think is a major turf war, right?
Yeah.
And it's huge. And speed to market is really your best friend, right? And having an individual who can elaborate, understand, and then progressively budget this project all the way through to completion. So,
yeah, that's great. And I think just, hearing that, like, unfortunately, even this story here of, if we don't have the right team in place, if we don't have the right vision for what's going to happen with, with the property or where we're going, with the vision of the project, it can take something that seems really exciting and make it really not fun at all and feel very drawn out. And, and I'll just speak just a little bit to market right now with banking. We're approved and we've got a timeline that we're working on right now under a certain interest rate. And if something is drawn out too far, we're having to maybe go back and go through underwriting again. And, there are all kinds of things that can really go wrong if we don't have the right team. One thing that you said, and I just want to circle back around to something that you said when you talk about, you guys being able to really help, I'll say, define what the goals are of the office and the flow and, some of that. Can you talk just a little bit about that? Because I think we've got some doctors that are probably listening that are like, well, what exactly does that mean? Like, is he wanting to know, like, how many parking spots I need in my parking lot? Or are we talking about, on the inside of that building, maybe it's a building just for me, or maybe it's a building where I'm going to do multi-specialty and I have to kind of think about my practice plus what other spaces may be in there. Or maybe even it's just the flow of, and I do this a lot with doctors, like, how do we maximize the amount of space that we have? Can you talk just a little bit about what that discovery process looks like for you guys?
Absolutely. So, it's in our method is, starting with the vision, understanding what the 5, 10-year plan is going to be for the practice.
Right.
And, we've been approached by many doctors who want to have that additional passive income, call it, right, or additional investment space attached to the building, right? And if you're referencing that, or multi-specialty, bringing in, whether it be a specialty and bringing in another, GP or complementary service offerings, right? So what's really important is what we call it master planning. And understanding, whether it be if you're starting from scratch, this is a master planning exercise. Actually, I just recently had a doctor call me yesterday. He's got 5 acres under contract. He says, "Okay, I got it under contract. Escrow is going hard next week. Money. When do I hire you? When does that happen?" And I said, "Well, Doc, best way to tell you is tomorrow if you can. But I know we got some more, trusting exercises to do and understanding the vision, right? So let's see if we can buy some time on this contract." So, understanding that vision, and that's where it all starts. is positioning and documenting and detailing what's the end goal for this facility.
Right.
And what that does is that helps define the scope of work as well. And I think that's what gets lost during this whole thing too as well. It's one thing, and it's great to put together and envision what the place is actually going to look like or feel like. But it's another thing to actually have a team of construction experts alongside those individuals progressively budgeting what's the mark we have to hit, what's the limitation that we can actually afford for the project, and that's going to size it appropriately. So to elaborate on that, it's really about, we take it as a kind of a full picture effect, and we are going to the city, understanding parking requirements, understanding points of egress and ingress, and then move. Obviously, as we're doing that, our design team is moving along the interiors of the practice as well, understanding patient flow, right? Where and what's the flow of the patient, and also connected to their business model, right? Are patients sitting in the car now? Are they coming in the waiting room? I mean, those are, I've heard a couple of podcasts you've had, and it's those questions should be asked, right? And of other firms, and it's understanding that new business model. What's the new trends, or where do you see? And then even your staff, right? Staffing it's hard today, right? And it really truly is hard to maintain, retain, and keep staff engaged, right? And have that sense of worth, or place that they feel at home in these facilities. So really taking some thought process through that as well, and putting it into action within the facility.
Yeah, that's great. So I gotta imagine that being prepared or not being prepared can really affect how fast a project comes to fruition, or how slow. Like going back to our story that you were talking about. Can you kind of talk about, how do you guys help if you guys are involved? How do you help? Kind of make sure that we're staying on track, and we're, again, you mentioned speed, but how do we make sure that our practice keeps moving forward? Can you talk about maybe some different scenarios and what doctors should be paying attention to, whether they're working with your team or another team? Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll go into methodologies, right? Sure. And there's two methods or two avenues they can choose to engage. Really, the first method is going to be what we call the traditional model, right? And that's to hire your local architect, retain your local architect, and they may have a designer on staff, and then you got to retain an engineer, followed by an engineer, right? And bringing these civil and structural engineers on board, and getting their input as well. There's some time in that, and there's a lot of time in putting that team together, and then getting that team to collaborate and talk together accordingly. And then when that's done, you have now a construction set, right? Or a bid set to take out to GCs. And during that process, you're qualifying the GCs as well. I always say there's two ways to look at it when you go to a GC. When you go this route, is you want to make sure you're looking at qualified bid versus low bid, right? Who are the players who understand how to read the language of the drawings and understand what actually takes to start building the facility, and know, honestly, there could be missed things as well. You'd be amazed what a plumber or an electrician can see that maybe is not on there, right? And say, hey, recommended, this isn't on the drawings, but is going to be needed, right? Unfortunately, there's a lot of lost time in that process. And really, when you go out to bid, 100% of the time, budgets do not align with what the expectation of what it's going to cost, right? I mean, there's that moment of gasp of oh my gosh, this is going to cost, in today's market, we've seen six figures. And the doctor I was actually referencing, 3 years later, it's actually $1.5 million more. The project, his bids were coming in $1.5 million more than what he thought, right? So there's a lot of lost time there. And when that happens, to a degree, I mean, they're what we call value engineering exercises and rebidding, right? So you go back to your architect or engineer, you with the input of hopefully a GC that you feel comfortable with at that time, and you're kind of doing an exercise to value engineer the drawings, right? And to participate. And in today's market, it's honestly very hard to find a GC that will participate in that exercise.
I've seen this over and over and over again. You're exact. I mean, you're hitting on something that 2022, we weren't dealing with this in 17, 18 leading up to 19, but this is a for real thing right now. And I think it's going to be here for a while for us.
It surely is. And that's a whole another rabbit hole I don't want to go down is trade pool, right?
Yeah.
Vocational tools and the lack of, right? So we do, and there's definitely going to be a lag cycle for that. But yeah, getting a GC to participate in those exercises is going to be hard, but finding the right GC who understands the language of the engineer or has worked with that engineer before and the actual architect, because there will be like two buffaloes fighting, right? Yeah. I mean, it really is going to be that way. So, and finding a good team to represent you, or, you know, in this case, alongside you to make sure the best interests are kept in the forefront.
Yeah.
So with this cycle, you know, there's a long time in this area in which is really the great exposure for time delay, right? Yeah. And speed is not achieved in this scenario. You know, the second is going to be the design build methodology, right? Now, design build is a methodology, right? It's just a methodology it's a delivery, right, model. And it's finding a team that actually, or a firm that actually has, when design build actually has the architects on staff, design team on staff, and they are actually the GC who is actually deploying all the site supervisor, all the trades in-house, right? One point of accountability. You don't go at anybody else. There's questions. You go to that one team, right? And really the risk is when you get under contract, the risk is actually in a true design build fashion, you're working on a lump sum agreement, right? So that risk is placed onto that team that they are delivering it for that cost, right? And on that time, right? So in the traditional model, there's not, right? There's still that finger pointing game, right? Who did what and who missed what, right? So there's two different modeling with that. So, and then in this project, budgets are aligning with the design expectations, right?
And I just have to say, docs listening, this is key. You know, when we have a certain amount of money that we've got from the banks, and we know that we need to be somewhat hitting a cost per square foot amount, you know, being able to, number one, convey that, have that conversation up front with your design team. And then, you know, I really feel like this design build approach is really where we're at right now in our industry. It's so hard to do the bid process anymore, but we're going in with that expectation of we're designing and I'm sure, you know, with Apex, you know, you guys you're doing this where you're saying, okay, we're thinking, I'm just throwing a number out, so nobody hold me to this, you know, $220 a square foot, and everything that's being done from materials that are used to what's being shown to you is with that thought in mind. And I'll let you expand on that a little bit more, but I think these are the things where sometimes my docs are out there saying, I don't know if I want to tell them, you know, just, you know, yes to everything. And then when we're so out of budget and you're so deflated, because when you strip everything back to what your real cost was, it doesn't feel like you're getting what you wanted, right? You know, so I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit, because I think the transparency of with your team, with the doctors, everybody putting everything on the table so that, you know, our expectations are met instead of, you know, promising and then under delivering, which I know that's not what Apex does, but I think we run into that a lot out there.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, we're always in a way of, I like to say that I'm mutually exclusive rather than highly inclusive, right? And what I mean by that is we're not everything to everybody, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. And I think as a specialist or as a dentist, same thing, right? As a patient, right? And that's okay, right? That's you get the right people in your chairs, and you understand, and they're gonna buy your value. They trust you, right? And that's what's really important is finding a team that trusts and understands from the start. And I always say, I'm not afraid, and I like saying it, is I want to talk costs on the first meeting,
Right.
right? Immediately. I mean, I want to share in your optimism on where we're going, and I absolutely will. I will share in the optimism to say, and your vision and where we're going to go, and what it's going to look like, and the grandiose plans, right? But I also want to keep it right there with us is, what is this going to cost? Because I don't want this feeling to be I'm dipping my hand in your pocket and asking for more every time, right?
Yeah.
And it's an awkward conversation. It's not a position we like to be in. And in the design build process, that is negated, right? I mean, your understanding and how we engage with clients is our number may look way larger, right, on an engagement with us than the traditional model of going with an architect who's speculating on we think it's going to cost X in the market, right? Well, there's no proof to that, right?
Until it goes out to bid, and then you see what comes back, right?
Exactly. And then all that time, right?
Yep.
Your exposure to that time, right? Delay, right? So that's where we want to make sure for us is positioning it correctly and knowing that budget is within that thought process as we are designing it, because design drives costs, right? And anything you do, as simple as where you're buying your clothes, right? I mean, as a consumer, right? So we got to make sure that those expectations are held, right? I'd like to actually also reference the Design Build Institute of America. They actually just recently threw an article out there on accumulated data that has proven projects that are delivered 102% faster start to finish for design build versus traditional model, right?
Wow. That
Big
that
number.
right
I don't know if I
there.
could believe that. I was speculative, right?
Yeah.
And then also 36% faster during the construction phase alone, right? If you break that down. And at the time, people say, well, you kind of lose you lose control of design, or you lose control of, like you said, I don't want to first one to talk loses, right? Like, no, not when you're building, and especially in the environment that we're in, right? In the trade pools and where construction is today. And that's where also creating a team of experts who have done this, right?
Absolutely.
They're going to know what things are to bear in the market, and not go to, which is fine. You still can go to your guy that did your kitchen or built your home, right? They did an exceptional job, right? You had a great experience. Doesn't mean they're going to be an expert in building your practice, right? You can actually leverage them and use them if you want, right? But the expertise really comes in the proof of the process, right? And the individuals who do this day in and day out, right? And being experts in the field. So that, to break it down, that's, I always like to use the data that show, there is proof in it, right? And there's a way, and there's a proven way that is an accelerated approach, right? And back to what I referenced before, in healthcare being a turf war, right? Speed to market is very important. But keeping in mind, there is always a budget and there's always a limitation. We're going to do our darndest to hit that right early on in the conversation, right? I sometimes had a client actually tell me, Steve, you're double-edged sword. You fall on your sword in some ways too, because you tell me what I needed to hear. So you could have lost my interest there, right? I could have went with a cheaper guy, right? But it's something I'd rather position myself in that way, that I'm not falling on that sword later and ruining and tarnishing my relationship with that individual, but also my reputation in the industry, right?
Yeah.
And that's to us, that's very important. So
yeah, I think that's great. And that's really good takeaway information. Docs, if you're out there listening and thinking about this, there's a lot of ways to do it, as Steve's saying, but there are definitely ways that are going to get us potentially, to our end point, which is having that practice open and seeing those patients and, moving on with that dream much quicker. And a lot of times, much more efficiently, but ultimately also within, trying to stay within that budget that we need to. And I've seen this over and over. I've been doing this for 17 years, specializing in startups now. And, the thing that is such a bummer is when you've got, the team coming back and saying, we have a change order, we need more money, we need to, and you're like, well, where am I going to get that from? Because, I was only approved for X amount and, I don't want to tap into my savings, or I don't have any more savings to tap into. So I think, again, nowadays, especially, we've got to be so careful with what we do and, be really smart with our decisions. I think gone are the days where, we can just ask anybody to do it. And we've really got to take a real sniper approach, be super smart, super, just make good decisions all the way through, because time is the killer. If it takes too long and, you're still sitting on a project 3 years later, yikes, that's a lot of money you've been paying to not be making money.
That's exactly right, Jill. Right. And I always say it's an extra, which I know is a lot of money, a couple $100,000 on a project, right? When you go with a qualified firm, right, who knows what they're doing, and they're giving you the bid or proposal that is congruent to what is your vision and a delivery time, right? It's a drop, that couple hundreds of thousands of dollars is a drop in the bucket compared to 6, 7, 8 months lost in time, right? And how where your productions are, right? And being $1 million+ practice, right? So
Yep, for sure. And especially, and we'll finish up on this, especially thinking if you're leasing and you're building your dream project, and now you're going month to month in your previous lease and spending all this extra money, and you've already purchased your, like, oh my gosh, it adds and adds and adds and adds. So being smart going in, I think that's great. So as we kind of finish up this discussion, and this has been great. I know, again, I love doing this podcast because I know that we're just getting good information out to docs out there. If you were going to tell, some of our listeners, like, here's, a couple takeaways that I think, if you're thinking about this, or I want to leave you with, what would that be?
I would definitely leave them with, do not be afraid to ask questions early on. I always say, call somebody when you don't need them rather than when you do need them.
Good.
Curiosity can really help position yourself appropriately in the foreground, right? And be steady with it, right? Be steady, ask questions, and call people, right? Hear stories, understand, and listen to and learn from that. But I think it's don't be afraid to reach out, and I think you're the same way, and act as a steward to, paying it forward, giving advice, right? I always give free advice. It's no problem. People say, well, why do you do that? Right. Well, the advice is only as good as the implementation. Right. And I'm happy to, and if you're confident about what you're getting, right, you're going to go with the right people to implement that when you have to exchange monies and all of that. So, but I would definitely say call somebody when you don't need them rather than when you do. So.
Yeah, that's great. That's right. All right. So somebody wants to get a hold of you. They're saying, I'm going to implement what Steve just said. I'm going to ask some questions. Doesn't cost you anything. How do they get a hold of you? How do they find out more about Apex?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely, obviously, we'll include the link to our website. Just reach out to us. We're a small firm here in Chicago. We're You're not just going to get some random person. You'll talk to myself anytime. So just reach out through our website and just call, and it will go, straight to one of us. So
great. What is that website?
It's apexdesignbuild.net.
.net. Okay, perfect.
Yep.
apexdesignbuild.net. All right, perfect. And I know you guys are also out there socially, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm sure they can find you anywhere out there.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being on Hey Docs. This was great information. Again, I know my docs have been just like, all right, that was good. So as you know, or may not know, on Hey Docs, I like to finish up all of our podcasts with a little speed round. So are you, right. I know it. Are you ready to take the speed round with Jill?
Sure.
Okay. Coffee or tea? Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Oh, yes. I'm a huge coffee drinker all day, every day. All right. Do you have a favorite book?
I would say The Challenger Sale.
The Challenger Sale? Oh, I haven't read that one. I keep a list of books that are always, I keep it on my phone. And anytime somebody says one that I haven't read, I add it on there. I'm a huge consumer of books. So
your library, leather-bound books?
Yes. No, I'm actually audio. I've got a huge library of audiobooks. And then if I really like a book, then I buy it to put on my library shelf. But it always starts audio.
That was a good conversation starter too.
Yeah, exactly. How about, do you have a favorite outdoor activity?
Oh, now that I have kids, it's changed, right? I'd say after a long day of work, scaling the playground with my 3-year-old son, acting as if I have no responsibilities, right? So I think that's awesome too as well. And then I'd also say spending time out at the lake with my wife and kids, that's our happy place, no doubt. So
right. Memory making moments, right? Memory making moments. That's great. So if you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
I would say, something I love to do, and my wife always says, I know this got to be speedy, but closing the gap in a room or finding the 6th degree of separation. She's like, I don't know how you know it, but you know somebody somewhere everywhere, right? And it's just, I just love chatting with people, whether in an airport bar or you're sitting in line, that's at a Starbucks or something. So yeah.
I love that. That's almost like your superpower too. I think.
There we go. I never thought about that.
And then as we finish up, if there was one piece of advice that was given to you, or I'll put it, your best advice ever given to you, what would that be?
First thing that comes to mind is there's no wrong way to perform an act of kindness. I think
I love that.
That's definitely something I like to do, whether, you're buying a sandwich for somebody or giving them a warm blanket, whatever it is, it's like, I think you overthink sometimes. Should I do that? I see something and it's like, should I do that? Don't question it. I say there's no wrong way to do it. So just do it.
Oh, I love that. And, that is such a true statement. I mean, just do and don't worry. Just do it. Yep. That's great.
Don't worry about them. They are those guys.
Exactly. Well, thank you again for being on Hey Docs. This was great. And I would love to have you on a show again. So,
all right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. We'll see you, Jill.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Steve works with doctors who are early in the process of developing new projects. He thrives to offer value at every step of their endeavor. Steve's experience in the industry spans over hundreds of projects, and he readily shares expertise and direction for dental entrepreneurs who are embarking on their journey through the design-build process. Apex delivers exceptional ROI and peace of mind at every phase of the design-build journey. And Apex's industry-leading expertise mitigates risk, eliminates surprises, and saves time and money and effort.